I never imagined that the inheritance I lovingly prepared for my daughter, Rebecca, would become the stage for my greatest humiliation. 70 years I've lived. Martha is my name, and I've seen a lot in my time. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for that moment. I came home expecting the quiet comfort of my sanctuary, the familiar smell of my own space, and maybe, just maybe, the warm embrace of the people I loved most in this world. Instead, I found a scene that didn't just break my heart, it shattered it into tiny, irreparable pieces. The long flight home had left me so tired. All I wanted was my bed, a cup of tea, and the peace of my own four walls. But as the taxi pulled up my driveway, a strange sense of unease washed over me. The lights were blazing. Loud, unfamiliar music thumped through the night air, and the front door, my front door, the one I always locked so carefully, was standing wide open. It felt like a punch to the gut even before I stepped out of the car. What on earth was going on? I walked slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last, toward my house. It wasn't just open. It was spilling out laughter, shouts, and a cacophony of voices I didn't recognize. Dozens of strangers milled about, everywhere, in my garden, spilling onto my porch. My jaw actually dropped. This was my home, the place I built with my own hands, my sweat, my sacrifice, brick by painstaking brick. It was my sanctuary, and it had been invaded. Then I saw them. There, right in the middle of all the chaos, stood Rebecca, my only daughter, and David, her husband. They were laughing, so loud, toasting with raised glasses, completely oblivious. Or maybe not oblivious. Maybe they just didn't care. They looked so happy, so carefree, surrounded by all these unknown faces, celebrating something. In my own living room, my heart just sank. It twisted into a knot of pain so sharp it took my breath away. I tried to walk in, to make sense of it all, but it was like wading through a thick, murky fog. People brushed past me, their eyes unfocused, their smiles wide. No one noticed me. No one saw me. I was a ghost in my own house, an intruder in my own space. The humiliation was a cold, creeping thing, starting in my toes and spreading upward, chilling me to the bone. It was silent, but it screamed inside me. My daughter, my son-in-law, the very people I had poured my entire life into, they looked straight through me. They were completely absorbed in their own world, their laughter echoing through the rooms I had so lovingly furnished, the walls I had so carefully painted. There I was, 70 years old, standing amidst a crowd of strangers, feeling like the loneliest person on earth. I could feel a lump growing in my throat, a painful knot of betrayal and disbelief. I wanted to scream, to ask them what they were doing, to demand an explanation. But no sound came out. Instead, a strange calm settled over me, a quiet, furious resolve. I managed a weak, forced smile, a desperate attempt to keep my composure, to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. Every fiber of my being wanted to collapse, but something deep inside, something. They had no idea. They had no clue that behind that pained, forced smile and that giant lump in my throat, I held something they didn't account for, a tiny burning spark of understanding, a key, if you will, to a turning point. That day, which had started with the crushing, unbearable pain of their silent humiliation and complete rejection, wouldn't be the end of me. It would be the very beginning of my liberation. What they still didn't know, couldn't possibly imagine, was that this inheritance they seemed to believe was already theirs, this house, my house, was about to take an unexpected, life-altering turn. They had no idea just how much things were about to change, not just for me, but for them too. And that was just the start. And that was just the start. That night, standing there, amidst the wreckage of my expectations, I was Martha, 70 years young, or at least that's what I used to tell myself. 70 well-lived years, filled with purpose, with dreams, with a relentless drive to build something real, something lasting. Or so I thought. Before all this, before the noise and the strangers and the crushing realization, I truly believed I had lived a full, meaningful life. Every single penny I ever earned, every minute of every day, it was all poured into my family, especially into my only daughter, Rebecca, and her husband, David. They were my world, my reason for being. I've always been a woman of principles, you see. Hardworking, yes, absolutely. From the moment I could, I was working, saving, building. And family values? Oh, those were at the very core of who I was. My home, this house that was now a chaotic party zone, was built not just with bricks and mortar, but with sweat, with love, with every ounce of my dedication. It was my sanctuary, my refuge, my safe haven. It was the place where I raised Rebecca, nurturing her, watching her grow from a tiny baby to the woman she is today. And I had so many dreams for it, you know? I pictured my grandchildren running through these very rooms, their laughter echoing where now only strangers' shouts filled the air. I imagined family dinners, holidays, quiet evenings filled with warmth and connection. Every single piece of furniture in this house, every photograph on the walls, even the little potted plants on the porch, they all have a story. Each one holds a piece of my life, a memory of a sacrifice I gladly made. This wasn't just a house, it was a living, breathing testament to everything I had achieved, everything I had fought for. It was the materialization of my biggest dreams. I remember it so clearly, even now. Many, many years ago, when I first bought this piece of land. It was just an empty lot back then, nothing but dirt and weeds. But I saw potential. I saw a future. I saw a home for my family. And as I saved, meticulously, penny by penny, and watched those walls go up, brick by painstaking brick, I was already thinking about what it would mean. This home, I told myself, would be more than just a place to live. It would be a legacy, a tangible proof of a life dedicated to those I loved, a refuge for future generations, a place where they could always feel safe, always feel loved. But more than anything, it was my most significant asset. It was the living proof that I existed, that my dreams had materialized, that my hard work had created something real and lasting in this world. It was my anchor, and there I stood, my anchor dragged through the mud. The tranquility of a life that I had poured into others, a life of endless dedication and sacrifice, was about to be brutally, undeniably tested. And I knew, deep down, this was just the beginning of that test. And I knew, deep down, this was just the beginning of that test. But even with all the wisdom that comes with 70 years, I couldn't have imagined how deep that test would cut. Now, looking back, I can see the cracks were there long before I left for Europe. Not huge, gaping holes, just tiny, hairline fractures in the foundation of what I thought was our strong family bond. Before my trip, when I was busy making all the arrangements, there was already this feeling, a subtle distance from Rebecca, my only daughter, and David, her husband. It wasn't spoken, not out loud, but I felt it. Phone calls, which used to be long, full of chatter and laughter, also were more mutual than dynamic phone calls, became shorter, so much shorter. They were always rushed, always hurried. Rebecca would say, "Mom, I've got to run, something came up." Or David would chime in with, "Yeah, busy day, Martha." And then they'd hang up before I even had a chance to ask how their day really was, or tell them anything important about mine. Visits, too, became rare. So rare. It used to be that they'd pop by, unannounced sometimes just because, or we'd have our regular Sunday dinners, a tradition I loved so much. But then, those traditions just faded away. Every time I suggested getting together, there was always some excuse. Always. A work deadline, a friend's birthday, a sudden appointment. They were always vague, those excuses, and they started to sound a lot alike. I tried to brush it off. I really did. I told myself, they're busy, young people. That's just how modern life is. They have their own demanding routines, their own world. It's natural for things to change. But deep down, despite all my justifications, a persistent pang of sadness told me something was truly changing. It was a quiet ache right in the middle of my chest, a feeling of unease that settled over me every time a call ended abruptly, or a planned visit was rescheduled, then forgotten. It was a nagging whisper that things weren't right, no matter how hard I tried to pretend they were. I remember making plans for my return, little things that meant so much to me. Rebecca had promised to pick me up at the airport, to be there waiting for me. And David had casually mentioned organizing a welcome dinner, a small gathering, just us, to celebrate my return. Those promises, simple as they were, had meant the world to me. They were a sign of their love, their care. But as the departure date grew closer, then came and went, those promises just seemed to evaporate into thin air. They were never mentioned again, not by them. I didn't bring it up either, hoping they would remember, hoping they would surprise me. They didn't. It felt like they were becoming increasingly absorbed in their own worlds, a world that seemed to have less and less room for me. They had their friends, their hobbies, their careers, and I, who had always been accustomed to being at the very center of their lives, their go-to person for everything, suddenly started to feel like an accessory. Like an old scarf you might pull out for a specific occasion, then fold up and put away without much thought. Someone who could be set aside easily without much concern. It was a subtle disregard, you see, almost imperceptible to anyone else looking in. No big fights, No loud arguments, just these little, quiet slights that, for me, chipped away at my soul. Forgetting my favorite tea, not asking about my doctor's appointment I'd mentioned, talking over me when I tried to share a story. Small signs of disrespect, I know, but for me, they hurt deeply. And I, in my endless innocence and unconditional love, always tried to justify them. Oh, they just forgot. They're tired. They mean well. I just wanted to be loved and respected. That's all. I truly believed in the love we shared, a mother's love, a family's bond. But the feeling of being cast aside, of becoming irrelevant, was growing stronger every single day, like a shadow lengthening, threatening to swallow me whole. I had no idea. I couldn't know then that this coldness, this quiet, creeping distance, was just the calm before a truly devastating storm was about to break. And that storm, it wouldn't just ruffle my feathers. It would shatter my entire world. The day of my return. Oh, that day. It wasn't just a storm, it was an earthquake. The kind that shakes you to your very core and leaves everything you thought was solid in ruins. I arrived home, bone weary from the long journey across the ocean, dreaming of nothing but a hot bath, the quiet comfort of my own bed, and the familiar embrace of my home, my sanctuary. I had pictured it so many times on the flight, the scent of my own pillows, the gentle hush of the neighborhood, the simple peace of being back where I belonged. But instead of silence and peace, a monstrous wave of noise crashed over me the moment I stepped out of the taxi. It was a deafening roar, a cacophony of loud music, shouts, and bursts of laughter. My eyes struggled to adjust to the flashing lights that pulsed from inside the house, painting the familiar walls in garish, unsettling hues. My home, my beautiful, quiet home, was unrecognizable. It was taken over, invaded. A huge, sprawling party was spilling out of every window, onto the porch, into my carefully tended garden. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of strangers swarmed everywhere, like ants on a picnic blanket. Only the picnic was my life. I stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of the chaos. And then, through the pulsing lights and the moving bodies, I saw them. Rebecca, my daughter, and David, her husband. They were right there in the thick of it all, at the center of the storm they had unleashed. They were smiling so widely, their faces flushed, their heads thrown back in loud, booming laughter. They held glasses, clinking them together, toasting. To what, I wondered? To this destruction? To my absence? They moved through the crowd as if they owned the place, as if every corner of my home, every inch of my life, was their playground, their stage. My eyes swept across the rooms, trying to find something, anything that looked familiar, that still felt like mine. But everything was wrong. My things, the furniture I had carefully chosen, the little trinkets I had collected over a lifetime, the family photographs that held so many precious memories, everything was messy, displaced, dirty. My beautiful antique rug, stained with spills, cushions thrown on the floor, my grandmother's vase, pushed to the edge of a table. precariously close to falling. It was all treated with such a shocking lack of respect. It was as if a tornado had ripped through my life, and these people, my own daughter and son-in-law, were standing in the eye of it, celebrating. A desperate need to be seen, to be acknowledged, welled up inside me, to stop it all, to make them understand. I tried to move closer, to call out to Rebecca, to David, to break through the noise, the laughter, the wall of strangers. I tried. I really did. But it was no use. I was ignored. Utterly, completely ignored. People bumped into me, pushed past me, without even a glance. I tried to catch Rebecca's eye, to wave, to make some small gesture that would say, "I'm here, your mother is here," but she didn't see me, or she pretended not to. I was just another body in the crowd, another unwanted guest, a nuisance. There in my own backyard, under the glow of those harsh, indifferent lights, I was publicly humiliated by my own daughter and son-in-law. It wasn't a scream or a direct insult. It was worse. It was their indifference, the curious glances from strangers who wondered who the old woman was, standing awkwardly in the doorway. The carefree laughter that washed over me, ignoring my very existence. The feeling of being a ghost, haunting my own space, my own life. It crushed me. It pressed down on my chest until it felt like I couldn't breathe. It was the cruelest betrayal, not with anger, but with complete, utter disregard, proof that to them I was nothing more than a nuisance, a resource to be exploited while I was away, someone to be pushed aside when I dared to return. The pain of that moment, the unbearable weight of their casual disrespect, was so sharp it almost brought me to my knees. It was a silent scream inside me, a wail of disbelief and heartbreak. But even as it threatened to consume me, something else began to stir deep within. A tiny, almost imperceptible shift. The pain, though unbearable, was about to transform into a strength they would never, ever imagine. A quiet resolve that would burn brighter than any of those party lights. This wasn't the end. This was just the turning point. And in that crushing moment, at the height of that public humiliation, something truly unexpected happened. A strange, almost eerie calm enveloped me. It wasn't the peace I'd longed for, not the comfort of my sanctuary, but a different kind of quiet. A cold, hard quiet that settled deep within my soul. I didn't scream. I didn't cry in front of them. Not a single tear. Though my heart felt like it was being squeezed by a giant invisible hand, I simply observed. I saw it all with a painful, blinding clarity. Every single detail of that degrading scene. My favorite sofa, the one I'd chosen with such care, now stained with dark liquid, a greasy mark marring its soft fabric. My beautiful garden, the one I'd spent countless hours tending, trampled and muddy, flowers crushed under careless feet. Every single one of my memories, every cherished item, treated with utter disrespect. My grandmother's antique clock, usually so perfectly placed, was knocked askew, almost falling. The air was thick with the smell of spilled drinks and stale cigarettes, replacing the familiar scent of my home. And then there were Rebecca and David. When they finally did notice me after what felt like an eternity of being ignored, it was just a quick, unremorseful wave, a dismissive flick of the wrist. No apology, no concern. Just a hurried, almost impatient gesture, as if I were a distant relative they barely knew. Not the mother who had given them everything. Their smiles remained wide, their laughter carefree, their eyes already turning back to their guests, to their party, to their stolen joy. I just melted back, retreating to a quiet corner of the house, away from the flashing lights and the deafening music. I leaned against a wall, trying to become invisible, silent, just absorbing. Every single detail of that degrading scene burned itself into my mind, like a brand. The way they laughed, so carefree, so full of their own joy, while my world was collapsing around me. The way they used my possessions, my home, as if it was already theirs, a given, something they had every right to exploit. The total, absolute lack of gratitude for all the years, all the decades I had poured into them, every sacrifice I had made, every dream I had put aside for their happiness. It all seemed to mean nothing. And as that indignation swelled and swelled in my chest, a memory, sharp and clear, cut through the noise and the pain. A memory I had almost forgotten, pushed to the back of my mind because, well, it hadn't seemed important until now. It was a detail, a piece of paper, the documents, the deed to this house, this very house they were now treating as their own. For them, it was a certainty, a guaranteed inheritance, a future already claimed. They talked about it, sometimes, with a casual arrogance, as if it was already theirs, waiting for them. But that wasn't entirely true, was it? Not yet, not in the way they thought. There, in that moment of searing, unbearable pain, a powerful understanding solidified in my mind. A cold certainty. I had a trump card, a silent weapon, a truth they had conveniently, perhaps deliberately, forgotten. It wasn't a loud weapon. It didn't make a sound. It wouldn't cause a scene here. Not now. Not while they were so oblivious. But its power was undeniable. It was mine. All mine. This quiet, undeniable power was what would keep me steady. It was what would give me the courage for what was to come next. For the path I knew, suddenly and clearly, I had to walk. They thought they had won. They thought they owned everything, including my peace, my dignity, my future. They were wrong. So utterly wrong. And that quiet, silent weapon, that forgotten truth, was waiting for the right moment. It would keep me strong, keep me standing, no matter how much they tried to break me. This was just the beginning of my quiet preparation. That quiet, silent weapon, that forgotten truth, was waiting for the right moment. It would keep me strong, keep me standing, no matter how much they tried to break me. This was just the beginning of my quiet preparation. But what I didn't know was that the worst was still to come. After the party, after the last stranger finally stumbled out of my house, the situation only worsened. You'd think, after such a blatant disregard for my home, for my feelings, they might offer an apology. A simple mom, "We're so sorry. We got carried away." But no, not Rebecca, not David. Instead of any hint of regret, any spark of remorse, they acted with even more arrogance. The house was a disaster. Dirt, stains, broken things, all left for me to see, for me to deal with. And when I tried, gently at first, to address it, to ask about what happened, they just brushed me off. They actually told me not to make a drama. Can you believe that? My home was ransacked, and I was making a drama. They said I should be happy they were enjoying the house. Enjoying it. My house. The one they didn't even ask permission to use. It was as if their joy, their party, was a gift to me. Something I should be grateful for. From that day on, it was like a dark cloud settled over my home. Arguments became frequent, almost daily. Not shouting matches, usually, but sharp, cutting words. Every word they spoke, every dismissive glance, felt like a dagger twisting in my soul. They'd talk to me as if I were a child, a burden, a stubborn old woman who just didn't understand modern life. They'd sigh dramatically if I asked a question, or roll their eyes if I expressed an opinion. It was subtle, but it was relentless. It wore me down, day by day, hour by hour. I started to see it clearly, the cold, hard truth. The feeling of abandonment was overwhelming. It wasn't just a physical distance anymore. It was an emotional chasm. I realized that my own daughter, my Rebecca, and her husband, David, for whom I had sacrificed my whole life, saw me only as a financial and emotional hindrance. Not a mother, not a person, just a problem to manage, a resource to exploit. Everything I had done for them, all my years of love and support, seemed to have evaporated into thin air, leaving only this stark, ugly truth. Loneliness became my most faithful companion. It clung to me like a second skin. The silence in the house, once a comfort, was now a heavy weight. I'd walk through the rooms, the ones filled with so many memories, and all I felt was emptiness. I tried to reach out to other relatives, distant cousins, an old friend or two, but it was strange. No one interfered. The few who visited me, out of a sense of duty or politeness, seemed to actively avoid the subject of Rebecca and David. They'd change the topic, look away, or just nod vaguely if I mentioned anything. It was like they were silent accomplices to my pain, afraid to take a side, afraid to upset the fragile peace, or maybe just uninterested. Each day was a battle, a silent, internal battle against sadness that threatened to consume me, against the crushing humiliation that burned like a hot coal in my chest, against the terrifying feeling that my life, the one I had built with so much purpose, no longer had any meaning. What was I here for? Who was I here for? The pain reached its peak, a silent scream that no one heard, a cry for help that died in my throat, because who would listen? I felt trapped, cornered, my dignity stripped away, piece by painful piece. They thought they had me. They thought I was old, irrelevant, incapable. They thought they had won. They truly believed that this house, my life's work, was already theirs, a gift handed to them without effort, without gratitude. They were so confident in their perceived victory, so assured in their control over me. They saw me as a faded photograph, a forgotten relic. But I was still Martha, and though I felt broken, pushed to the edge of despair, a tiny spark still flickered. I was about to show them that the voice of dignity, even when whispered, can be louder than any scream, much louder. But I was still Martha, and though I felt broken, pushed to the edge of despair, a tiny spark still flickered. I was about to show them that the voice of dignity, even when whispered, can be louder than any scream, much louder. The silent scream inside me, the one no one heard, finally pushed me to act, not in anger, not in vengeance, but with a quiet, burning certainty. I chose a quiet evening after one of their particularly condescending exchanges, a casual dismissal of my feelings that felt like the final straw. I called them into the living room, the one still subtly bearing the scars of their party, for what I announced was a serious conversation. My voice, though not raised, held a tone I had never used with them before. It was firm, unwavering, leaving no room for argument or delay. Rebecca and David arrived, slouching onto the sofa, their expressions already showing that familiar impatience. I could see it in their eyes, the slight roll, the barely concealed sighs. They expected another one of my old lady complaints. I knew it. Another lecture about tidiness, or about how they never called enough. They were already tuning me out, ready with their excuses, their dismissive smiles. But then I started talking about the house. Slowly, deliberately. Not about the mess, not about the party, not about my pain. No. I talked about its value, its meaning, its future. And as the word house hung in the air, I watched their gazes change. The impatience in their eyes flickered, replaced by a flicker of curiosity, then a dawning awareness. Their bodies straightened a little, their casual slouch gone. They were listening now, truly listening, because it touched on the one thing they really cared about. And then I announced it. The words came out clear and steady, in a voice that was entirely mine, entirely new. A voice that had found its power. I will be selling the house. The shock on their faces was immediate. It was like a sudden, violent crack in their carefully constructed indifference. Rebecca's jaw dropped. "What?" she exclaimed, her voice suddenly shrill, filled with anger and utter disbelief. "Sell the house, Mom? But this is our inheritance. You can't do that." Her eyes, usually so dismissive, were wide with a raw, ugly emotion. Fear. Fear of loss. David, usually so composed, so good at playing the calm, reasonable son-in-law, quickly chimed in. He sat up straight, leaning forward, his voice tight with demand. "Yes, Martha, explain yourself. What are you talking about? You can't just spring something like this on us." He was demanding explanations, as if I were stealing something that already belonged to them by right. As if I had no right to my own decisions, my own property. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with their sudden anxiety, their naked greed, and their profound selfishness. It was almost suffocating. They were so loud in their protests, so sure in their supposed claim. That's when I reached into my bag, slowly. I pulled out the documents, the thick, crisp papers, neatly folded, the house deed, the actual legal proof of ownership. And tucked inside, a business card with the name and number of the real estate agent I had already met with. I held them up, not waving them, just holding them firmly for them to see. I looked into their eyes then. My own eyes were not filled with anger, not with bitterness, only with the quiet serenity of someone who was finally, definitively, reclaiming control of her own life, the control they had so casually, so cruelly tried to take from me. "This house," I said, my voice still firm, unwavering, each word landing like a stone, "has always been mine." I paused, letting that truth sink in. It is my asset, built with my work, with my sacrifices, every brick, every nail, every hour of effort. My hard-earned money paid for it, not yours. "Inheritance, my children," I continued, looking from Rebecca to David, then back to my daughter, "is something one gives. It is a gift, freely given, out of love and choice. It is not something one demands." I took a breath, letting the full weight of my words settle on them. "And I have decided," I finished, my voice unwavering, "what I will do with my property." Those words hit them like lightning. The carefully constructed mask of control, of casual superiority, fell from their faces. Their arguments died in their throats. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the heavy, ragged breathing of Rebecca and David. Their eyes, previously so arrogant, now held only shock. And then, slowly, a dawning, belated regret began to surface, mixed with a chilling awareness of what they had truly lost, not what I had taken. They finally understood the gravity of the situation. Their inheritance was not a guarantee. It was my choice, and I had chosen. The true power, the dignity I had sought, had always been mine. They just never saw it, and now they would learn what that meant. What was I to do next? What would my life be now? They had no idea, but neither did I, not fully. They had no idea, but neither did I, not fully. What would my life be now? The uncertainty, after all that anger and hurt, was almost as daunting as the betrayal itself. But one thing was clear: I had chosen. And that choice, once made, was surprisingly freeing. The sale of the house was quick, so quick it almost felt like a dream. Once I had made the decision, once I had the papers in my hand, it was like a dam breaking. The real estate agent was efficient, the market was favorable, and before I knew it, the house that had been my anchor, my burden, my battleground, was no longer mine. It was a strange feeling, watching the sold sign go up, a mix of relief and a tiny, almost imperceptible pang of loss. But the relief was far, far stronger. I used part of the money from the sale to buy a new place, a smaller, simpler apartment. It's in a quiet neighborhood, a few towns over from where I used to live. No sprawling garden to tend, no grand rooms to fill, just a cozy space, bathed in gentle light, perfect for me. It feels like a fresh start, a clean slate. Every morning, I wake up to the sound of birds, not the echo of past arguments or the ghosts of a party that stole my peace. This new place, It's truly mine, without any expectations or unspoken demands attached. It's a sanctuary built not of bricks and mortar alone, but of freedom and quiet dignity. The rest of the money I saved. It sits in my bank account, a comforting presence, a shield against worry. I finally have enough to live with dignity and security without depending on anyone. Not on Rebecca, not on David, not on anyone at all. And that, for me, is the greatest luxury. It wasn't about revenge, you see. Not really. It was about freedom. Freedom from their expectations, from their ingratitude, from the suffocating weight of their demands. It was about reclaiming my own life, my own peace. Over time, as the dust settled and the quiet calm of my new life embraced me, I found something else, a new purpose. I'd sit in my comfortable chair, sipping my tea, and my mind would wander. I'd remember all those women I had met or heard about over the years. Women who, like me, had poured their lives into their families, only to suffer the sharp sting of ingratitude, the crushing weight of abandonment, at the hands of their own children. Their stories, once distant echoes, now resonated deeply within my own heart. I understood their pain, their loneliness, their silent screams, and so a new idea began to blossom. Slowly at first, then with increasing clarity. I decided to use my experience, my story, and yes, part of my resources to help these women, to create something that could offer them a glimmer of hope, a path back to themselves. That's how the Dignity Without Age Foundation was born. Just a small start, but a powerful one. Today, my days are different. They are filled with purpose. I dedicate my time to dignity without age, connecting with women who feel invisible, forgotten, just like I did. I talk to them. I listen to their stories. I share a little of my own. I help them rediscover their voice, the one that got lost somewhere along the way. I want them to understand, truly understand, that it is never, ever too late to claim the respect they deserve, to stand up for themselves, to choose themselves. My old house is gone, the one that was filled with so much pain and so many broken promises. But the new home I built for myself, the one made of purpose and empowerment, is much, much larger. It's a home for my soul, a home for my spirit. My life has blossomed in a way I never imagined possible. It's not about grand adventures or wild excitement. It's about quiet joy, about meaning. That act which Rebecca and David called selfishness, that moment when I stood firm and said, "This is mine," was in fact the greatest act of generosity I could have performed. First with myself, by choosing my own well-being, and then with all the other women I now help, by showing them that there's a way out of the shadows. I live unhurried now, with a clarity of mind I haven't felt in years. My soul feels clean, and I am peacefully, truly starting over. And I am peacefully, truly starting over. It's a strange thing, this journey, to feel like you've lost everything you thought you had, everything you built, and then, in the quiet aftermath, to discover something far more valuable, something you didn't even know was missing. It took a lifetime of giving, of sacrificing, of always putting others first to learn the simplest, most profound truth about myself. My life, my worth, my dignity, they were never, ever dependent on someone else's approval or their gratitude. I used to think that love, especially a mother's love, meant endless sacrifice. That being a good mother, a good person, meant always putting my daughter's needs above my own, no matter the cost. I genuinely believed my value was in being needed, in being the family's steady anchor, the one who always held things together. I found comfort in that role, even when it was exhausting. But that day, when my house was filled with the laughter of strangers and my own child looked straight through me, as if I were, my own voice, my own dignity, slowly, painfully eroded. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many of us, especially as we get older, find ourselves in similar situations? How many times are we seen not as people, but as numbers on a financial statement, or as figures in a will? Not as living, breathing individuals with years of experience, with stories, with love still to give, but as burdens, or even worse, as assets to be claimed, a guaranteed inheritance that's just waiting to be taken, without any effort, without any appreciation? It's a quiet cruelty, often hidden behind polite smiles, but it cuts so deeply. It makes you feel invisible, as if your very existence is an inconvenience. And you? Have you ever been treated as if you were invisible by those who should protect you most? As if your life and your sacrifices had no value? As if you were just a resource to be exploited? Maybe it wasn't a house or a big party, but a small dismissal, a forgotten birthday, a hurried phone call that made you feel like less than a thought. Have you ever felt the pain of being humiliated by those you love most, in your own home, in your own space, as if everything you built wasn't truly yours, but a guaranteed inheritance for others? That feeling of being an intruder in your own life, in your own sanctuary. I used to think respect was something you earned through endless giving, through unwavering loyalty, through being constantly available. But I learned that day, in the deepest, most painful way, that respect isn't asked for. You don't beg for it. It's commanded. It's a boundary you draw around yourself. A line you refuse to let anyone cross, no matter who they are. It's about recognizing your own worth, even when others fail to see it. And it's never, ever too late to put yourself first, to reclaim your dignity, to find that quiet strength within you, the one that says, I am here, I matter, and I deserve to be treated with respect, simply because I am a human being. My journey has been a powerful testament to that truth. A painful awakening, yes, one that stripped away illusions, but an awakening nonetheless. I lost a house, yes, a home filled with so many memories, both good and bad. But in return, I gained my life back. I faced betrayal, the kind that can shatter your spirit, but through it all, I found myself again. I found the Martha who had been buried under years of expectations and self-sacrifice. And now, I stand here not as a victim, not as someone defined by what was taken, but as a woman who chose herself. A woman who discovered that true worth comes from within, not from external validation or the approval of others. And that, my friends, is a lesson I will carry always. In my heart and in my purpose. My soul feels clean. It truly does. My soul feels clean. It truly does. Every morning now, I wake up, and the first thing I feel is a quiet sense of peace. No more knots in my stomach. No more dread hanging over me. Just the simple rhythm of my own breath, here in my own cozy apartment. The sun filters gently through my window, painting warm stripes on the floor, and I can just sit, sometimes for a long while, sipping my tea, and simply be. It's a peace I haven't known in years, a deep, settled calm that reaches right into my bones. There's no expectation looming, no demand unspoken, just the quiet hum of my own life, unfolding at its own gentle pace. It feels so light, so unburdened. It took a long, hard journey to get here, to this place of quiet knowing, to truly understand that my worth was never about what I could give to others, or what I owned, or how much I was needed by someone else. My worth was always about who I was, truly, deep down inside, that the dignity I craved, the respect I so desperately wanted, wasn't something to be granted by others, wasn't something I could beg for or earn through endless sacrifice. It was something I had to claim for myself. It wasn't about demanding apologies or forcing recognition from Rebecca or David. It was about an internal shift, a quiet rebellion of the heart that finally said, no more. No more compromising my peace for someone else's convenience. No more shrinking myself to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. I remember thinking, after the house was sold, after I moved into this small, quiet place, what now? The purpose I'd known for decades, that intense, all-consuming focus on my family, it was gone. And for a moment, a brief, scary moment, I felt truly adrift, untethered. But then, as the days turned into weeks, and the quiet comfort of my new routine settled around me, I started to see, and I started to really see the strength I'd built over a lifetime, the wisdom I'd gathered through every joy and every heartache, the profound compassion I still carried in my heart. All those years of living, they weren't wasted. They were lessons. My mornings are slow now, filled with simple pleasures. I might read a book, sometimes a bit of poetry that touches my soul, or listen to a gentle piece of classical music. Often, I just sit and watch the clouds drift by from my window, lost in my own thoughts, feeling the warmth of the sun on my skin. There's no rush, no urgency, just a quiet unfolding of time, a sense of being completely present in each moment. In the afternoons, I dedicate myself fully to dignity without age, connecting with those women, hearing their stories, sharing a little of my own journey. It fills me up in a way nothing else ever has. We talk about finding our voices again, about the courage it takes to draw boundaries, about the immense power of choosing yo. We share knowing glances across the table, sometimes a tear, but always, always a sense of shared understanding and a growing strength. It's a truly beautiful thing watching these women who once felt invisible and forgotten start to shine again, their eyes lighting up with newfound purpose. They remind me so much of myself, only now I'm on the other side, a little bit further along the path, able to offer a guiding hand and a listening ear. I've learned that true liberation isn't about running away from what hurt you, but about embracing who you become because of it. It's about taking the shattered pieces and with gentle care, building something new, something stronger, something more authentically you than you ever thought possible. And for me, that meant finally understanding that my deepest love, the one that needed nurturing and protection above all else, was the love for myself. It's not selfish, you see. It's essential. You truly can't pour from an empty cup. And it's part of a bigger story, a shared human experience of finding our footing when the ground beneath us crumbles, of reclaiming our light even after the darkest nights. It's about realizing that even when those closest to you fail to see your worth, even when they treat you with casual disregard, it doesn't diminish your value. Not one bit. Your worth isn't up for debate. It's inherent. It's simply there, a quiet, powerful truth residing within you. And because these real stories, these moments of truth and transformation are so vital, because we need to hear them and know we're not alone in our struggles or in our triumphs, I want to ask you something very important. It's about staying connected, about keeping this conversation going, this quiet sharing of what truly matters, of the courage it takes to live authentically. And if you want to keep receiving real stories like this, pay attention. YouTube might be unsubscribing you without warning. Confirm you are still subscribed